Joining us now is NBC's Hala Gourani and Mark Polymeropoulos, former chief of operations in Europe and Eurasia at the CIA and an NBC News national security intelligence analyst. So, Hala, good morning. This is really kind of significant. What happened here?
Very significant. This is a very high-level officer in Moscow, and basically the Ukrainians have taken the war to the heart of the Russian capital with that remotely detonated bomb that was hidden, we understand, in a scooter. So Igor Kirillov, a 54-year-old, in fact, he was born in 1970, is the head of that unit that you mentioned there of weapons of mass destruction, of biological and nuclear warfare. And the Ukrainians are saying that essentially his unit participated in that Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and was responsible for causing a lot of damage and deaths inside of Ukraine, and that they considered, therefore, this lieutenant general to be a legitimate target. Now, we haven't had reaction from the Ministry of Defense, but we've had an outpouring of condolence messages from various politicians and agencies inside of Russia. As far as Ukraine is concerned, as I mentioned, Jose, they're saying this is a legitimate target. This is somebody who was deeply involved in the war effort inside of Ukraine after the invasion in 2022. It's a very bold move. This is something that is going to resonate with residents of Moscow and across Russia as well. We're not now talking about actions on the border areas, right outside of the Russian side of the border with Ukraine, but we're talking deep into the Russian state. And Ukrainians, of course, are all just in the next few weeks waiting for what will President-elect Donald Trump's the fact that he's going to be taking office soon, will it mean for U.S. support of the Ukrainian effort against Russia militarily as that war grinds on, Jose?
Hala Gourani, I thank you very much. So, Mark, and Hala was saying this is an extremely bold move. Indeed, it was. I mean, Ukrainian security service sources say that a scooter laced with explosives was detonated, killing these two people in the streets of Moscow. How did Ukraine pull this off, and how bold of a move was it?
So, Jose, Hala's right. This is an extraordinary operation. This is called a high-value target op. In essence, it's a find, fix, and finish mission. What is amazing is this entails the Ukrainians having recruited sources not only inside of Russia, inside of Moscow. That's an agent network. That's individuals who would carry out surveillance with a pattern of life of the target, who would then employ the explosive and then call the target out. And so that is really an extraordinary breach of what many consider a denied area. And this is going to be deeply embarrassing to Vladimir Putin, absolutely humiliating the Russian security services, because it shows that Ukraine has this reach, again, not just into Russia, but into the heart of Moscow and against high-value targets. Really an impressive operation, in my old, business. But something I think that will resonate very deeply within the Russian national security infrastructure.
And Mark, so the fact that it was essentially a glorified IED, I mean, that's essentially what this was, right? And even though what I think what makes it extremely significant is, as you say, it was in a denied area. What do you mean by a denied area? And how difficult is it to get something like an IED into a denied area?
Right. There's thousands of Russian security personnel in Moscow. Denied area means there is a pervasive, security state that watches everyone's moves, whether it's camera systems, whether it's informants. And for Western intelligence services and for the Ukrainians as well, this is an area that's very difficult to operate. So by recruiting sources inside who can operate there, that shows a level of penetration of Russian security that I think is something that is quite noteworthy. And again, as you noted, they actually have to not only observe the target, but they have to smuggle in the explosives. Then they have to detonate this. This apparently was detonated remotely in a scooter, but that means individuals on the ground. So I think there's going to be a very severe, counterintelligence operation by Russian security. The heads will roll as well. And then the last piece is we are going to see, as Hala noted, kind of there's been a ferocious reaction from the Russians. There will be some retaliation, probably, unfortunately, in the form of strikes in Ukraine against civilian targets.
And, what can Ukraine expect? Is it, Mark, that a retaliation of this magnitude would include more than just increased missile strikes on what they've unfortunately been doing for years now, which is destroying parts of the civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. But could it lead to maybe some targeting, pinpoint attacks on Ukrainian leaders?
So, the Russians have tried, but the Ukrainians, of course, their security services are very good. I think, no doubt, Vladimir Putin and his security apparatus would like to do this. They just have not been able to. So I think the default mechanism will be just kind of more mass casualty events against the Ukrainians. But let's also note one thing as well, is that the Ukrainians, have been very worried, of course, of the incoming Trump administration, what they're going to do about the kind of flagging European support. This operation will be celebrated inside of Ukraine. There's going to be some satisfaction there that they're still in the fight. And I think that psychological piece is going to be quite important.
So what does that tell you, if anything, of what was the NKVD, what was the Soviet system, and what has become the Russian interior control and monitoring system?
So, they're good, but maybe they're not that good. And that the Ukrainians are able to penetrate them is amazing. So this is the first, the most senior Russian military official, security official killed. The Ukrainians have struck before. Several years ago, they took a shot at a Russian propagandist, ended up killing his daughter. But again, it shows that this all-pervasive security state in Moscow might not be as almighty, all-powerful as we think, and that is going to resonate inside Russia as well. It's going to resonate inside the Russian security apparatus, because they now know that no one is safe.